What's going on, everybody? Aidan from Birds vs. Boys here, continuing our draft talk content. Earlier this week, we did a mock draft where we chose for every team in round one. In that draft, we did have a trade up to number one and traded with the Bears, but it was not the Carolina Panthers. And shortly after that, the Panthers did just that, moved up from 9 to 1 to presumably take a quarterback. So let's expand on that mock draft that we did. If you haven't watched it yet, if your favorite team is drafting in round one, sorry, Dolphins fans, go check that out because we draft for every single team, play GM for everybody. We're going to play GM for the Carolina Panthers today and rank all four quarterbacks that are going to be on the board and options for them. So let's start here. The trade itself. If you're a Bears fan, you have to be so happy and just enjoying the situation and how fortuitous it is for you. If you're going to be bad this way. Find your franchise quarterback, have him set, and then have all these pieces around you to fill that in and build around him. So they have Justin Fields. He's your franchise guy. He's pretty much the queen on the chessboard for you, right? Like that's the toughest piece to find in the NFL as a franchise quarterback. All right, you've got him. Good. Now you have the number one pick in the draft. Load up on assets. The biggest thing right off the bat, trading for DJ Moore is fantastic to help out your young quarterback and your franchise quarterback. Build around him. And you saw last year, who was his best weapon? Maybe Chase Claypool, maybe as they traded for him halfway through the year. But he had to do a lot of it himself, had to do a lot with his legs. So right off the bat, just getting a guy like DJ Moore, who is a valuable wide receiver one in the NFL to help out your young franchise quarterback is a win. Now, you also have a ton of cap space to begin with before you even made this trade. As an Eagles fan, I'm a little bit worried. I've seen Javon Hargrave's name attached to the Bears for quite some time. So that could be a play for you to booster and bolster that defensive line and that defense for you. And on top of that, you're drafting in the top 10 still this year, and you loaded up on picks with this trade. So you have financial flexibility, a wide receiver one for your young quarterback. You have the young quarterback, and now you have an absolute arsenal of draft picks. Win, win, win all the way around for the Bears. Now for the Panthers, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. We just talked about it with Justin Fields. The hardest thing to do is find your franchise quarterback. That's what they're trying to do. So let's break down the four guys that they could draft at number one after this trade up. Let's start with CJ Stroud because I think this is the number one guy for them. I do like some of these other quarterbacks in the draft, but I think it's going to be CJ Stroud that goes to Carolina. We hear the term NFL ready all the time when it comes to quarterbacks, especially during draft season. I think Stroud is that guy. If you're going to give the NFL ready label, we're going to talk about some of these other guys, and they're a little bit more boom or bust than CJ Stroud would be. And I think if you're looking at Stroud, he has a lot of the things that you would want in a franchise quarterback in terms of strengths. So one of the things that really sticks out is ball placement. Can really put it anywhere, can make any throw on the field, deep throws, intermediate, short, everything. And then another thing that I really like, able to extend plays. So you wouldn't really classify him as a dual threat quarterback. We're going to talk about Will Levis. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson, two great athletes at the quarterback position. Stroud really doesn't take off like him, but he does extend plays a lot. You saw it in the Georgia game, which was on full display. They constantly create pressure with guys like Jalen Carter, and he had a phenomenal game. And you want to see that against some of the best defenses in college football. Well, that was the best defense in college football, and he put on a show. A lot of that was being able to extend plays. You think about Patrick Mahomes, he's not really qualified as a dual threat quarterback, but he uses his legs to set up his arm, and Stroud does that very well. And the next guy I'm going to talk about is Bryce Young. The big knock on Bryce, and we all know it, is size. We'll get into him, but Stroud is sturdier, bigger, more stable, more of that NFL prototype that you like to see. And I really think that all of those things, combine them together, you get the NFL ready label. Now, I think environment has a lot to deal with it. You look at where he was at Ohio State. He took care of the football, 41 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but he had great foundation around him. Throwing to Chris Olave, throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. over the years. Like, these are huge names that are wide receiver ones in the NFL for years to come. So, and Garrett Wilson, another one who was rookie of the year for the New York Jets. So he had great foundation. They had a great coaching staff. You love Ohio State's offense on the college level with the way that they're able to just spread them out. So I think you would really need foundation for him. I don't know if Carolina provides that just yet. doesn't help that they just traded away his best receiver option to get him. But as an Eagles fan, I can give praise to Frank Reich and his ability to develop quarterbacks. You saw him able to do that with Carson Wentz before the injuries. And I really think it'll help to have him around CJ Stroud. So that's why I have Stroud at number 1. At number 2, I do have Bryce Young. I think you're going to hear some comparisons to him, and everyone's going to do the same comparison. And I don't know if it necessarily makes sense. They're going to compare him to Kyler Murray because of the size. He's the smallest measured quarterback coming out, and he's even smaller and lighter than Kyler Murray, but they're not really the same quarterback. I think Bryce has a lot better arm than Kyler did. Kyler's probably better with his legs. We see the videos, and you saw the play against the Raiders where he was able to run around for, it seemed like 30 seconds to extend that play long enough for them to win and get that win in overtime against them. That's the stuff that he's able to do. But I think Bryce Young's able to push the ball down the field a little bit better than Kyler can. And then also, are we allowed to say this yet, that maybe those rumors about Kyler not being that great of a teammate are true? You don't have to really worry about that with Bryce Young. I think you would want to draft him for the leadership potential that he has. Playing in Alabama, playing in every big spot possible that you can in college football when you play at a school like that. And he played at a young age and started as a freshman, and really it just took off right away and won a Heisman. So I think he's one of those guys where I can see him going number 2 to the Texans, because if you're them, you've been bad for a while now. You've been tanking for a while, and you want to change your culture. And Bryce Young just seems, from a leadership perspective, to be such a culture changer. Your previous franchise quarterback had legal issues. It led you to trade him, go into this tank. This is kind of like the perfect reset guy, where you probably overlook the size because you want everything else that comes with him. And I really think that Young will be that guy. So I would say that he's going 1. And then at number 2, you're going to have Bryce Young. Now, the third guy, I love this guy because I love roller coasters. I love fun, exciting things, thriller movies that are about like bank heist and something like that, where it's high risk, high reward. That's Anthony Richardson. He could potentially be the biggest boom bust guy in the draft. You watched him at the draft combine, where he was able to put on a show and athletically is the best quarterback in this draft. The 4.4 time, his jumping ability, and you watch him just launch the ball down the field with a twirl of the wrist 70 yards down the field. He is fascinating from an athleticism standpoint. Now, if you've watched Florida games, did it translate to real life? When the pads are on, did it matter? At points, yes. You look back at week 1 against Utah, the spin that extended the play on the 2-point conversion, that huge win there. He makes big plays. He's very athletic. A lot of the comparisons were to Cam Newton on a smaller scale, but just that dual threat ability. But there were times where he couldn't make the throws. They had dull moments on offense. You look at that Vanderbilt game where the offense was anemic against a bottom dweller in the SEC, and they lost that game, and you're like, that's rough. But you look at it and you're like, I can't teach a kid to throw the ball 70 yards. I can teach him how to read a defense. I can teach him technique, but I can't teach him to run and throw like Anthony Richardson does. So I really think that he is still a potential option for Carolina at number 1. We just talked about the Cam Newton comparison, and he's not as big as Cam Newton, but he is 6'4". Like, this is a big kid, big, strong kid, and can run. So I wouldn't take him off the table just yet for the Panthers. We talked about the NFL ready label with CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson is kind of the opposite, right? Like all the metrics, all the athletic metrics are there, but the NFL ready portion of that isn't really there. He only started 1 year at Florida and was kind of behind some guys and only got that 1 year. So he's raw, but I'm coming to you as an Eagles fan. Like, I had a guy who's my quarterback now, who, if he doesn't hurt his shoulder, is probably the MVP of the league this year, who came in and you're saying, well, he's a great athlete. Like, he can use his legs to extend plays. He can get down the field. He's a dual threat guy. He's really strong. You really like his freak athleticism, but can he throw? And now he can throw. So, it's possible for Anthony Richardson too. As a Jalen Hurts guy, who am I to knock the team that tries for Anthony Richardson? Now, the last guy is Will Levis. And it's kind of ironic because I can see him going to the Colts, and they love those big white quarterbacks. So this is another guy that could be of that mold for Indianapolis. at 4, but I just don't see him going at 1 for the Carolina Panthers. That's why I have him 4th. Another guy, just like Richardson, who's a dual threat, used his legs a lot. When he was at Penn State before he transferred to Kentucky, he used his legs exclusively. They never threw the ball when Will Levis came into the game. They'd have these packages where they take Sean Clifford off, bring Levis on, and just use him as just, dive forward, plunge forward. Hey, you're 6'5", go get us 4 yards right here. So not until he got to Kentucky did he ever start really using his arm. So I think he's an interesting prospect. I think there are teams that will be interested in him, like the Colts and the Raiders there at 7. So I like him, but I can't wait to eat my words, but I'm much more intrigued with the 3 guys ahead of Levis. I think there's 3, and then there's a distant 4th. I just haven't seen enough from Levis to say, yeah, this is the guy. I like the dual threat capabilities. I think if you're going to be an NFL quarterback in this day and age, you have to be able to use your legs, but I just didn't see enough from him. And again, maybe this is, I live in Pennsylvania. We're watching Penn State every week. I saw for 2 years where they didn't even let him throw the football. So maybe it's just that bias and that's in the back of my mind. But I can see him being a distant 4th, and I just don't see him in the Carolina Panthers uniform. So I think he'll probably be the 4th quarterback off the board, depending on how teams feel about Anthony Richardson. So that's it. We're going CJ Stroud, number 1 for Carolina. And number 2, we have Bryce Young, but I can see him more with the Houston Texans. At 3, I have Anthony Richardson, which I am definitely not taking off the table. He is the wild card with Carolina. And then a distant 4th, I have Will Levis. So plenty of options for Carolina. Would be hilarious if they just jumped up and took Jalen Carter, or just traded back and got some ammo and said, hey, we graded Bryce Young higher, so you go up, take CJ Stroud. We'll move back and recoup some of those picks. A lot of options for them on the table. We'll have a lot more draft content coming up from the Birds vs. Boys YouTube. We're doing mock drafts every week. Check out our first round mock draft that we just did. It is it's really great for fans to see as we play GM for every single team. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be back this week with our next mock draft.